Hello, this is Cross Crown Radio and the Gospel Truth Podcast. I'm Mike Robinson, your host. We have an interesting show today, very important show because of all the recent news about the military of the United States confirming UFOs, seemingly confirming them as possible biological aliens. And so let's go over that. I'm going to show how that's probably not even a remote possibility. It's very, very implausible that these sightings are aliens that are biological entities. Now, we've seen this confirmed military footage of UFOs, and we've seen it getting clearer and clearer recently. So are they ETs, are they aliens, or merely unexplained scientific glitches in the space-time atmosphere? Indeed, remember, the ontology and behavior of light can be very strange and mysterious. So who knows what's going on out there with all the lights? Light, just a study of light. If you've ever studied light, what is light and how it behaves, it's very, very mysterious and hard to understand. And secondly, remember this. There's nothing in Christianity, nothing in the Bible that rules out the existence of flying saucers or aliens. The clear proof of biological aliens would be perplexing and unsettling and would impact both our culture and our religion, but it would not change anything in the Bible. Always remember that. And also remember that Christianity, as you can see in my hundreds and hundreds of videos, as well as my 45 books I've written, as well as many others I've written, there's a massive amount of proof, colossal proof for the existence of God. In fact, certain proof for the existence of the God of the Bible. But in the latest public statements, it seems that the U.S. military and the Pentagon are confirming the existence of technology from unknown sources that is superior to U.S. military technology. Perhaps that's merely a ploy, though, or a lie to our enemies. Maybe that technology, even if our own military is following it, is our own, but it's super secretive because they don't want it to be exposed to our enemies. So perhaps it's just a ploy, a lie to our real enemies, China and North Korea, subterfuge to kind of trick and confuse them, to keep them guessing over what the U.S. military truly has. Perhaps much of UFO activity is merely high-tech U.S. technology that we don't want our enemies knowing about. That's a real possibility. Now, if U.S. technology is not ours, then we are vulnerable to military conquest by aliens, or perhaps the Chinese military. Perhaps it's Chinese technology up there. But remember, UFO merely means unidentified flying object. And there's lots of those we just don't identify. That does not mean that they're biological entities from another planet. Nonetheless, if some nation or aliens have the technology that would defeat us, it would render us vulnerable, and that would be frightening to America and the Western world at large. So are UFOs earthly or beyond the earth? Are they from another dimension, or are they from our dimension? Are they spiritual and paranormal, or just merely physical? We don't know these things. Is the technology produced by another country, or perhaps just a very wealthy corporation? There are many corporations that are wealthier than some nations, and they have their resources that might be able to develop superior military technology on their own, and then they can sell it for billions, if not maybe trillions of dollars down the road. Now, I don't think that UFOs are biological aliens, because ETs, for them to travel to get to the Earth, is massively excessive to try to get here. Even if faster than light technology is possible, that results in backward time travel. A traveler moving faster than light is moving into the past and touching many known laws of physics. It doesn't seem possible that an ET could travel to our planet. Moreover, the big question is why all these hundreds and hundreds of UFOs, why are they so elusive? They've been around since the late 40s at least, flying all over the place, always seen. If the aliens want to conceal their existence from us, they should have the technology to do that, at least most of the time. Why are they so careless? Why do we get to see them all the time in the sky? Why do they allow us to see hundreds of them hundreds and hundreds of times. But yet, on the other side of the coin, if the aliens want us to know their existence, why not show their existence as obvious? Come down and have lunch with us. Have a burger with us at In-N-Out. Why don't the aliens land on the White House lawn? Why is that? That's a very interesting question that doesn't seem to make sense with them being biological entities from another planet. Yet the UFOs seem to leave no physical evidence, no lasting physical evidence that they came. Just some pictures, some film, usually with lights, and remember how mysterious light is. So the evidence is very, very weak that they could possibly be biological entities. And the distance from other possible planets that might possibly have life to get to our planet is so massive, it seems physically impossible, even if you could go the speed of light. But the evidence for Christianity is abundant. The proof for God in Christ is certain. Perhaps it's demonic activity out there. ETs, aliens, UFOs as biological entities seems extremely implausible. Perhaps the aircraft are merely unexplained scientific glitches in the space-time atmosphere. Perhaps UFOs are the manifestation of strange actions of light. Indeed, the substance and behavior of light, as I mentioned earlier, can be very strange and wondrous. And there's nothing in Christianity that rules out the existence of flying saucers or biological aliens. Nothing at all to fear if you're Christian. The certain evidence of biological aliens would be puzzling, would be unsettling, and would impact society and religion, but would not contest anything in the Bible. It would not contest anything in the Bible. And now I ask you to wait and go to the next section of this same video. It's going to be here in just a minute after a brief commercial, but hold on, because we have some more important information and evidence why UFOs cannot be biological entities. So hold on for the next section.
Welcome to the Gospel Truth Show produced by Cross and Crown Radio. We want to make a lasting difference in your life and in our community. Our mission is to produce biblical, entertaining, and Christ-centered programs for God's people and folks all around the world. Post a comment or question and sit back and enjoy the show. gospeltruthshow.podbeam.com.
Good evening and welcome to Cross and Crown Radio and the Gospel Truth Podcast. I'm Mike Robinson, your host. So glad that you're with us here on Cross and Crown. We got a great subject tonight, UFOs. It's the main subject. UFOs, are they real in the sense of alien spacecraft and real biological entities within? Or perhaps robotic entities within the spacecraft. Are they real? We're going to be talking about that today, as well as the possibility of jihadi camps in the United States. Those camps have been not just alleged, but they've been found. So we're going to talk about that. This is one of those things that almost sounds like those folks that really jump on conspiracies really love, but this one's actually true. As many of our listeners know, I'm not really big into conspiracies. Hello, Ralph. How's things going? I don't think most crazy conspiracies are actually true. Perhaps maybe the Kennedy assassination in '63. And a couple others, but most men have a hard time. Oh, thanks so much, Ralph. Most men have a hard time keeping secrets, as you see with the Watergate scandal in the early '70s. So I'm not sure how many of these particular conspiracies could be true, since men do have a hard time keeping those kind of secrets. So the question of the day is, what alien movie do you like best? Are there any alien movies you like best? I like the Independence Day. I think it was around 1999 that came out. And one reason I liked it, I know this might sound bad, but of course it's just a movie. I know it's not true. But you have all these New Agers on top of the building welcoming their space brothers to their planet, right? They got all these signs, welcome space brothers, we love you, all this kind of stuff. And then of course, then their space brothers zap them with some kind of powerful ray gun and kill them all. Of course, I don't like to see death, but it is a movie. But there's many different types of alien movies. I think the new Predator is out this weekend. I think it's called The Predator. So I guess there's a super predator that's going to hunt the predator who's going to be hunting humans on the earth. Looks interesting if you like those type of movies. But so that's the question of the day. What do you like? What is your favorite alien movie or UFO movie? It could even be one of the old ones from the 50s. It's kind of cheesy with today's standards, but yet the stories behind some of those were pretty fascinating, especially when they just started. We also want to tip you off on our Patreon page. If you happen to have a chance, if you just throw in $1, it really, really helps us. And you can check that out. The description of our Patreon page is within the section of describing this particular video. You can see that. So one proof that I have against the physical entities of UFOs and aliens is one, I don't know who first coined it, but I really liked it and I really use it a lot when I talk to folks who believe in biological entities coming to the United States as well as the Earth from other planets. And that would be this. When these alien spacecrafts were sighted in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, as well as the early 80s, the Russian or the Soviets were really opposed to the United States, as was China. They were communist countries who believed in atheism, proposed atheism, exhorted the people to believe in atheism, hated the church, hated anything to do with Christianity. Now, if they had any proof that there was aliens from another planet, the USSR, as well as China, as well as some of the Eastern European nations that were communist and atheistic, they would have presented the material for the world to see. See, here's proof that there's aliens. Now, I don't particularly believe that if aliens were discovered from another planet, that it would obviously refute the Bible. It wouldn't. But yet, the Soviets, as well as China, did think that if they could bring proof out that aliens did visit the planet, this would help push down religion. This would help suppress religion and religious activity because it would drive people crazy. They might not have any answers in their thoughts. So if there were truly aliens visiting the United States, if there was truly alien spacecraft visiting the world, why would not the Russians, or the Soviets, I should say, or the Chinese in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s produce the proof, and of course then help to discuss religious problems, and that would be going forth on that. So I don't think they are. I'll give you some other reasons. One other reason, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, for the folks that are listening to this, is that the amount of UFO sightings has declined greatly since the early 2000s. It's declined greatly. Now, you would think it would actually increase. The amount of UFO evidence and such would increase. Why? Because that's when many, many people, the average person, started having a camera on them all the time in their phone. So notice what happened. And this is measurable. And it's very steep, the decline in UFO sightings. It's this. Almost all citizens in most Western countries, as well as a lot of the other nations out there, have smartphones or have phones that have cameras on it. And so if there was an alien spacecraft hovering above them, they could take a picture. Dozens of people could take pictures, just like we see when there's possible problems with police brutality and such. There's lots of different phones recording that. So not only do we have not more alien pictures since the smartphones have come out, we have less. A lot less than what we used to have when we didn't have everybody with basically a video camera on their person in their smartphone. So that's a pretty dramatic proof to seem to imply that visitors from other planets are not coming to the Earth. That's just one. Of course, it's not concrete, solid, but it is something to ponder. The one I gave earlier, of course, is the communist atheistic countries never produced any proof for aliens when it would seem to conflict with some religious beliefs and help suppress religion even more than they were doing. So are there physical beings visiting this planet from other planets from across our galaxy or across the universe? Hello, Deborah. So good to have you. That is a question. And the question of the day is this, though. What is your favorite alien or UFO movie? Is it Aliens or Alien? You know, I think they made like 5 of those in that franchise, as well as some of the ones that were kind of cousin movies to them, another couple. Those type of movies, or did you like Star Wars? Do you like Star Trek? What are your favorite, if you have any at all? I noticed my wife, and I think this is true with a lot of females, is they tend not to like that kind of sci-fi. Obviously, there's lots of exceptions to that, and it's not a hard, fast rule, but my wife will not watch an alien movie with me at all. She doesn't like them. So the other thing about it is a lot of scientists have said, you know, with the incredible amount of distance between possible worlds that could inhabit life, of course, again, that's based on the presupposition that life can form easy through evolution, Darwinian evolution. Of course, that's, of course, a different subject, and I would not agree with that by all means. But if that even occurred, if those things could occur, which they don't, the amount of travel, the amount of distance would not make it possible that you would be dying. You'd have to have some kind of a way to be put asleep, like you see in some sci-fi movies. You even saw that the old Twilight Zones, where they'd be in a sleep so that they could survive hundreds or maybe thousands of years of space travel. Or perhaps robots could do it, but we don't see that. But most scientists say even that is not really workable. The distance are just too great between them. And so I'm not going to get in that aspect of it too much, because there's a little bit debate on that, and it's going beyond what we're talking about now. So are there physical aliens, biological creatures that visit the planet, or have they sent robots in spacecrafts to visit the planet? Hello, Christina. It's good to have you. Make sure you tell Jim I said hello. It's good to have you guys. Now, a lot of New Agers say, well, you know what? The Bible even talks about UFOs. And of course, most of you probably know the places they go to. They usually go to the Gospel of John that talks about the cosmos, right? God so loved the cosmos, the world. That's not what the Greek word in Jesus's day, cosmos, meant. It did not mean the whole universe. It generally meant mankind, okay? And specific parts of mankind, even more than that. So that's not that. The other one, of course, is Ezekiel, the wheel within a wheel. What's interesting about Ezekiel, though, when you read the book and you read that particular section, hello, it's so good to see you, Christina. When you read that section, you can see it's a vision. How do we know it's a vision? Because it says so in the book. So it's a spiritual vision. So it's not like Ezekiel is out there in the middle of the desert. Hello, Jill. It's so good to have you. It's not like Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel, is out there in the middle of the desert looking up in the sky, and he sees some kind of spacecraft or a wheel within a wheel. And what the heck is that? No, it was a spiritual vision that God gave him to teach some particular truth. So are there actual biological aliens visiting the planet? Are there robots from other planets that maybe have been created by other beings visiting the planet? I would say no, but I do think there is something behind the phenomenon of UFOs and aliens visiting us. Now, Project Blue Book, which is kind of old now, it's kind of outdated, but using its research, it found answers to 94% of the so-called visitations of UFOs and aliens. They said, well, they're weather balloons, they're sightings of helicopters, there's cloud formations, or this. They were able to explain 94% of it, but that leaves 6% that they didn't. Now, let's just say maybe a third of the 6%, so maybe perhaps 2% are unexplainable. You can't explain them. And then you have real people testifying, passing lie detector tests on some of these visitations. But when you dig deeper in the visitations, it seems like perhaps these things were not physical encounters, but perhaps spiritual encounters. And the reason I'm going to make that part of my thesis tonight is that much of these encounters, maybe these abductions, like that was in popular TV with X-Files and some other movies, perhaps they're more demonic or occultic manifestations occurring in these people's lives. Because there's been no practicing, there's a key word, practicing born-again Christian ever abducted by aliens. That's interesting, isn't it? So something is going on. And now what also happens is many of our space brothers, which is what the New Agers call these aliens, whether the Greys or the reptilians, they call them their UFO brothers. What these so-called UFO brothers teach is always occultic wisdom, if you will, and it's not wisdom. this ancient wisdom that's basically Eastern religion. And so it's just repackaged with the UFOs. Now, I know this because before I got saved at age 19 by walking into a 7-Eleven store and an evangelist giving me the gospel. I got saved right there in a 7-Eleven store in 1979. But before I got saved at age 19, I was really, really into UFOs. I believed that UFOs were not, that they were what we thought were God and angels. That's what I believed because I was an atheist. I did not believe in God. So I believed if there was a God, he would be super technological, not supernatural. Of course, nobody ever asked me the question, well, then who made them, right? That would have blown my whole theory right out the door, but no one ever asked me that question, right? So I really, really got into UFOs, and I read one book, I don't know if it's still out there, God Drives a Flying Saucer. You can tell by the title, God Drives a Flying Saucer. Now, I was lost. I was really lost, right? I mean, I had a great life. I was a professional baseball player, and I was really, really happy. So the only reason I truly followed Jesus was because it's true. It's absolutely true. The proof is certain. There's full certitude for the Christian faith. This I know for sure. But before I got saved, I read, I don't know, I was reading a book a day, and I did that for about 30 years, and including before I got saved, reading these UFO books. So I read, I don't know, 30 books on UFOs, and they were almost all filled with New Age garbage, right? That anytime there was some communication from these aliens or space brothers, it was all this Eastern religious garbage. I didn't think it was garbage in those days because I wasn't saved. So I bought into it. So I thought, you know what? If there is this thing called God, what's been revealed in the Bible and so forth, it was just some UFOs, you know? The UFOs visited, they gave the light show and the earthquakes, kind of like you see with, if you look at some of the movies from the 1970s, I think one of them is by the one that was in Richard Dreyfuss. What was that called? Maybe somebody knows. Something of the third kind, right? And so within that, when they come to that lady's house, she's got the little boy in the house, and the little boy is going to be abducted. And when the show reveals the UFOs, you see these blazing lights, you see the shaking of the house, and all these kind of manifestations, and you could say, well, look, that's kind of similar to what happened in the book of Exodus on the Mount. And so that's what I was thinking as a non-believer. You know, the Bible's definitely not true. I mean, I'd never read it, but it's not true. Why? Because that was my presupposition. And I'm really into UFOs and such, and so I'm thinking that. But in that film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Richard Dreyfuss also has the aliens. I think he's in a truck, and he's driving down the highway, and all of a sudden, the alien spacecraft, I think it's in his rearview mirror, and then all of a sudden, again, the light show, the shaking goes on, and all these kind of things occur. Then in Tom Cruise's movie, which was a remake of one of the old classics from the 1950s, I forget the name of that movie. It was made in I think 2005. Maybe somebody could look that up. The Tom Cruise movie where the aliens come in their tripods. War of the Worlds, that's it. War of the Worlds. So this remake of the War of the Worlds in 2005, Tom Cruise, he's out there. The aliens come, and when the aliens come, all of a sudden you have this thunder and lightning occurring, right? And then the aliens come into their craft. So you see all that kind of stuff, and as a non-believer, you could see how you could try to fit that into, yeah, that's what the Bible says, right? Of course, it's not proper hermeneutics, proper biblical interpretation, but you could see how people who are lost could come up with that. And so lost people, they get into, ghosts and poltergeists, Ouija boards. Don't ever get involved on a Ouija board. I'll save that story for another time. Again, I wasn't saved when I got involved in that. But wow, unbelievable, horrible stuff. Don't get involved in that. But all these occultic activities, when you hear the sources from these ancient beings, if you will. Hello, Jackie. Hope everything in Kentucky, right, is going well. But all these aliens, when they come, they always give this ancient wisdom. And when they speak, this ancient wisdom is always the same as what the occult tells you about, right? Oh, don't worry about sin, You're fine now. There's no judgment when you die. You'll have a chance to keep going on and don't worry about all of that, right? There's never been one UFO sighting with an abduction there's never been one that had the abductee saying that the aliens said that Jesus Christ died on the cross and rose again. Never one of them. Not one of them. Some of them will say, yeah, he was a man of wisdom or a being of wisdom. Hello, Chauncey. Hello, Troy. It's good to have you guys. Thanks so much. We're having a lot of rain out here in Texas. I don't know how the storm is on the East Coast, but we're getting a lot of rain here in Texas near Dallas-Fort Worth in our little town called Granbury. But back to the UFOs. So you have all that background with the occult, which seems to line up with the UFOs. And then when the entities, the so-called entities that are within the spacecraft, whenever they speak, they tend to say the same things that Eastern religions say, same things that the occult say, same things that you'll get from a Ouija board or other phenomenon from the occult. So don't do it. Don't do it. Now, the first two proofs I proposed that seem to refute the possibility of biological entities coming to our world would be, number one, the idea that the space travel, that they could make it that far as biological entities. Hello, Harry. It's good to have you. So that's one of them. And so as we think about these subjects, think about that. The other one I gave was all the atheistic countries, the communist countries, before the fall of the Soviet Union, all of Eastern Europe basically, and the Soviets, they had great reasons to bring proof for aliens if they had ever visited the planet or if they had ever had any alien spacecraft. Why? Because they hated religion, and they would think this would help suppress religion further. China is still officially communist. They still attack Christians. If they had, and it's a big country geographically as well as population, if they had any material from a spacecraft, they would propose it just to push down Christianity, which they hate. So, but they don't. So all these atheistic countries, all they had to do is produce some evidence of aliens or an alien spacecraft to try to diminish Christianity or other religious activity, and they never have. Now remember, these groups, these communist atheistic groups, they really pushed and pressed atheism. They closed churches. They took crosses down off buildings. They arrested, and still China still does, they arrested Christian ministers, put them away or killed them en masse. Okay, so this was part of their program. This is part of their agenda. If they had any alien spacecraft, they would obviously bring it forth, but they didn't. So there's one reason that I think that there are no grays, there's no reptilians visiting the planet. Another particular proof would be this. This is really fascinating. When you look at UFO sightings in the 19th century, okay, this is really powerful. When you look up, because some San Francisco papers reported on the aliens, hello, JJ, so good to have you. Some San Francisco newspapers of the 19th century, that's the 1800s, talked about, in certain articles, about alien spacecraft coming and people seeing them, sightings in the sky. Now, what's interesting about that is, not one of the sightings, okay, listen to me, not one of the sightings ever reported in the 19th century looked like any of the spacecrafts that we see in UFO sightings in the 20th century. The flying saucer picture, right? None of them were saucer shaped. None of them looked like Star Trek vehicles or anything to do with Star Wars or any of that, right? What they looked like were sailing ships that could fly, as well as once they started inventing lighter than air craft, in other words, blimps, they would look like that also. So what the witnesses described was only information that the witnesses knew. In other words, the crafts looked like sailing ships, or later when the invention of lighter than aircraft were invented with the blimps, some of them were described like that. But none of them, not one of them, described vehicles in the 1800s that looked like the vehicles described in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. Boom, that's it. Okay, why is that? Now, something else you might not know. This is really interesting. The guy who termed the word flying saucer did not report seeing a flying saucer. What he reported was seeing something that looked like a crescent. This is important. The way the word saucer came out was, he said, it skipped along the air like a saucer would on water. but he made sure that his description was not a saucer-shaped vehicle. But somebody misread the article and called them and deemed them flying saucers in the 40s. And boom, all of a sudden, all the descriptions are flying saucers. Everybody sees flying saucers, but the guy who invented the term did not see a flying saucer. It was misdefined and misdescribed. Isn't that amazing? So here you go. Nobody saw vehicles like modern, so-called modern flying saucer viewings and sightings in the 1800s. They all look like ships that were in the sky that sailed on the sea. Any ship that would look like that would sail on the sea in those days, they described in the sky, right? Okay, not like the modern ones. As well as later when the blimps were invented, now all of a sudden they started looking like the blimps. And the flying saucers started appearing after the guy used the term saucer, but not in the description of the vehicle, but in the activity of the vehicle. So that's real interesting. So this whole phenomenon, I think, is spiritual. I think it's occultic. I think it's demonic. I do not believe it's biological entities. I don't even believe it's robotic entities within spacecraft. Now, again, I'm a guy who, of course, my material would have been from the 1970s, because once I got saved in 1979, I was not a UFO devotee anymore. After I got saved, I put all that aside, obviously, and threw it in the trash. But before I got saved, my favorite book on it was God Drives a Flying Saucer. Okay, that shows you where I was at before I got saved. I was an atheist, non-believer, but that's what I believed. But all these vehicles, I think, are spiritual entities. Why do I believe they're spiritual entities? Because they speak the same language, they use the same phraseology, they say the same false doctrines that we see demonic entities from the occult speak. So you got two different sources saying the same thing in similar words. I wonder if they're the same source. That's what I think. So for me, I think it's a pretty clear case that there could be some things out there. I don't know quite what they are, but I think they're spiritual. I don't think they're just transdimensional. I don't think they're physical or material at all. I think they're spiritual. The people that get abducted have very similar experiences as those who are demon possessed. Interesting. And no practicing, that means a church-going, Bible reading Christian has ever been abducted by so-called aliens. Isn't that interesting? So I think the case is pretty solid that aliens are basically occult figures. They're mystical teachers, space brothers that bring ancient wisdom, which is not real wisdom, right? The beginning of wisdom is fearing God, and that's one thing the New Age does not do. They will not fear God. They say there's no judgment, there's no hell. Just do your own thing, you'll be fine. You'll get another chance in another life. Reincarnation, all that, right? Of course, it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. The serpent's lies, you won't die. There's no death. There's no judgment. And that's what the alien counters say. Don't fear death. There's no judgment. You won't surely die. And of course, that came from the original serpent. It's also interesting that many of the so-called biological entities that are aliens are reptilian. Even the Greys that are kind of a different race, if you will, of aliens, even the Greys look more reptilian too. They're like snake-like, in their features, the smoothness of them and so forth. A lot of Steven Spielberg's movies, I think he did quite a few different movies. When you see the aliens, they're very kind of reptilian looking, right? And so, isn't that interesting that the reptile in the garden, the snake, said, "Oh no, you shall not surely die." You don't need any of these things. You don't need the cross. You don't need the Redeemer, right? The lie after lie after lie, same source. So no abductee ever said that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins and rose again. Not one of them. That's very interesting, Chauncey. Very, very interesting. USA Today said that 50% of Americans believe that UFOs are real. When they define real, I think they mean in the sense of alien beings visiting the planet and spacecraft. Over 60% of them say that they believe they might be aliens inside them. Now, I don't know if you've seen the movie that talked about SETI. Actually, there's been a few movies. There was one that was really big about SETI, and it was with Jodie Foster. I think it was in 1999. Carl Sagan, the pagan, inspired it, I believe. And they had this thing on SETI, SETI is basically searching for ETs out there by using information. If information comes down that communicates to people that are listening with obviously satellite microphones, and they hear a pattern, they hear some information. Hello, Michael, so good to have you. They will deem that there's intelligence behind it if they hear a code, if they hear some mathematics, if they hear some information, if they hear a language, they'll say there's a code there, so there must be an alien life there. What's interesting is, now notice, SETI has, I don't know if SETI's in operation. I know there's been, they were closed for a while, opened again, closed for a while. I don't know where it's at now. But SETI was open for decades, right? The search for ETs. So it's open there with all these ET sightings, all these UFO sightings. Hello, Ian. So all these sightings are going across the world, and you got SETI with these massive satellites listening to the heavens, trying to find any spacecraft visually or through audio, and they can't find any. They've never found one. They thought they might have found one in the 1970s, but there's no proof of that. But they didn't find any. Now think about that. All the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings by people in the sky thinking they saw some kind of spacecraft. SETI, almost all that time, had listening devices as well as visual devices trying to scan the sky for anything, and SETI never found one out of all those UFO sightings. And they're looking for something physical, something material. So it seems like perhaps these beings are spiritual and not physical. Perhaps that's why SETI couldn't find them. Now, the other thing that's interesting about that is that a lot of us are not, don't have our telescopes in our backyard and in our amateur astronomers. But there's thousands and thousands of amateur astronomers out there. Across the globe, across the country, thousands and thousands of them. And they're scanning the sky, they're looking at the stars, they're looking at the planets, they're looking at galaxies, and they never see, there's never been one that sighted a UFO. Isn't that amazing? Now, they may be amateurs, but, being an amateur at something and you're doing it consistently, it's a hobby, you start getting pretty good at it. You may not be a trained professional, but you're pretty darn good at it. And yet they never found a UFO. All these thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are much better trained than me walking out the door thinking I just saw a UFO. Okay, these are astronomers. Now there's also tons of professional astronomers looking across the sky. And none of them ever saw an alien spacecraft. Isn't that interesting? Hello, Curtis. So there's lots of reasons not to believe that these are biological entities. Number one, the atheistic countries in the 1950s, 1960s, 70s, and 80s never brought forth any proof that they found an alien spacecraft or a biological entity which would have helped suppress Christianity, which is what they were doing. China's still doing that. If any of those countries, including Cuba, including Cambodia, including China, all these atheistic countries, Eastern Europe, if they had any proof for an alien craft or an alien biological being, they would have proposed it to try to disconfirm Christianity. I don't think it ultimately does, but they thought it could. Okay? Couldn't come up with anything. All these countries had tremendous reasons to come up with something. They never could. So there's one reason. The other reason, of course, is the vast distances. The distances seem to be too far for biological entities to make it. Perhaps robotic entities, but even a lot of scientists say no, even that, it's just too long. It takes too much time, right? So that's it. The other thing is the spacecrafts that were seen in the 19th century were described like 19th century vehicles that were around for those people to see every day, like sailing ships, That's what they would describe when they looked up in the sky and saw so-called spacecraft. So they never saw anything like or described anything close to being like the crafts being seen in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and so on. Only in the 19th century. Interesting, isn't it? Now, also, the term UFO, as I mentioned earlier, was coined by a guy who did not see a flying saucer, but he saw a craft that looked like a crescent, and he said it skipped along the sky like a saucer, describing its movement, not what it looked like. Yet, somebody, a newspaper guy, took the term as the description and mislabeled it and misdescribed it, and then all of a sudden, in the late 40s and the 1950s, everybody's seeing flying saucers, even though the first guy who saw one did not see a flying saucer. So you can see, this is all built on such a flimsy foundation. And again, no practicing born-again Christian has ever been abducted by so-called aliens or space brothers. So that's it. We know that Project Blue Book found that 94% of their investigations in these flying saucers were explainable, so 6% weren't. The 6%, just because they can't be explained, does not mean that there was aliens running around Roswell. What happened with Roswell was there was a secret mission by our government doing some kind of craft that we were making to visit the Soviet Union. And so they kept it hush-hush. That was not released until, I think, a decade or two ago. And so because there was a cover-up, not a cover-up of an alien, but a cover-up so the Soviets wouldn't know what we were doing there, all of a sudden it became spacemen, right? So that's what happened there. Ezekiel, we learned the wheel within the wheel is easily defined properly by a vision, because that's what the book says. It's a vision, a spiritual vision. Ezekiel wasn't on top of his roof with a telescope and saw, oh, look, some space brothers. No, he had a spiritual vision from God of a wheel within a wheel, okay? A lot of commentators think that's describing God's eternity, God's omniscience, God being everywhere present. In other words, some of the attributes of God within that vision. So we've also discovered tonight that much of the UFO abductions, when the aliens, so-called aliens, take people into their spacecraft, that they're very similar to demonic possessions, and they speak terminology like the occult does, and the ancient wisdom of Eastern religions and all that nonsense. So they line up with that, which is also interesting. Now, what I always thought, when I was watching X-Files, I think that was in the 1990s, and X-Files came out, and everybody gets abducted, and of course, all the reports that came in newspapers, not the TV show, but real newspapers. Everybody who got abducted, they were prodded and pried with medical instruments that are very similar to what we have. Okay? Now think about it. When you look at Star Trek, right, and in Dr. McCoy, I think it is his name, when he examines somebody medically, he uses some kind of scanner, right? And he knows what's wrong with the person. Okay? Now, aliens, you would think, would be much more, have much better technology than we do, than to have to cut and pry into us like our modern surgeons do today in our modern hospitals. You think their technology would be a lot more advanced than what we have. So, all the prodding, all the opening them up, the little devices they implant in our skin, they would obviously have better ways, better technology than that. What's also interesting is every single device that has been found as an implant by a so-called alien abduction, every single one that has been tested has been found to be a source from the earth. There has not been one that's been tested that could not be explained by materials found on the earth or technology from humans. Not one. Okay? So I propose that UFOs and aliens are more of a spiritual problem. That's why there's been no craft that's been brought forth from atheistic countries to help suppress Christianity. None have been brought forth. No alien bodies have been brought forth to discount or try to discount Christianity and other religions, that atheists would have a strong motivation to bring forth and yield and reveal. They haven't done that. So that's interesting. Now, most of the alien, so-called alien craft that have been sighted in the sky have been weather balloons. They've been missile tests. They've been Venus. Venus moves, and Venus is very bright. Have been illumination flares. That's one of the bigger ones. Have been certain cloud formations. That's another one. Have been military experiments also in the sky, or been hoaxes and pranks. So flying saucer was a term that was invented by a guy who did not see a flying saucer, and so it was misreported and misdescribed, and all of a sudden, because it made the newspapers, all of a sudden everybody saw flying saucers. Even though the first guy who saw a flying saucer did not describe it as a flying saucer. So that's amazing. All the flying objects that were seen in the skies in the 1800s describe vehicles that look like the sailing ships of their day. Interesting, isn't it? Right? Not one of them described any craft that looked like anything seen in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, in the 1800s. So there we go. Now you could say, well, there's painting on certain caves that look kind of alien and so forth. Well, yeah, they could look like lots of different things. And aliens, I think, are not biological entities. I think they're spiritual entities, if there are any. And this activity is similar to demonic possession and has the same problems within it. Yes, they're very, very pagan. And so you got to be careful, even if you're a Christian, of getting involved in the occult and paganism. God warns against it. There's problems associated with it. If you ever delved into it, you need to renounce it and just put it under the cross and go forward. Don't get involved in any of the pagan stuff. I was, before I got saved, like I said earlier, I was really, really into UFOs. And one night I got in the Ouija board. And I highly recommend never even bringing one in your house. Don't even, I wouldn't say you need to be afraid of it. You shouldn't. Christians, in the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. We don't have to be afraid of anything, but you should not practice anything that's pagan, anything that's the occult. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. It's a real bad idea. But before I got saved, I'm with 3 other buddies and 4 gals. So 4 and 4 of us. And we go up to my apartment. We wanted to scare these gals. If they would be scared and frightened, they would run into our arms, that kind of thing, right? So there we are in my apartment. We're playing this Ouija board. And we're asking it questions. And it's answering the questions correctly. We had people ask questions that nobody else knew the answer but them. And it was answering it. And then all of a sudden, I forget who it was, but somebody asked this guy that was with us when he would die. When he asked that question, the thing's moving really, really, really fast. And all of a sudden, within the room, everybody saw these bright red lights, almost like a siren was going off in the room, okay? Going off in the room. All this crazy activity was going on. And the table was rising up there, and all this incredible phenomenon was going on. None of us were Christians. None of us knew anything spiritually. None of us were trying to be overtly into the occult, but you can't play with fire, right? So as this is going on, pretty soon the girls physically run out of the room, and then there's just us guys, and then one peels off, he physically runs, all of us run out of the room. We ran out of the apartment, shut the door, did not spend the night there because of the activity, and here's what happened. Myself and my roommates, 2 other guys, we moved out of that apartment the next day, never went back. You say, well, you guys were non-Christians, scaredy cats, so forth. Okay, fine. All I can tell you is what happened. I didn't expect it to happen. I thought we were going to hoodwink the girls with this little board game thing, After all, Parker Brothers, produced it. But you can't play games with that. Yeah, I'm really concerned about a lot of the movies. The paganism, the polytheism that's in there, Chauncey, calling people away from gods. They try to give a lot of the superheroes godlike attributes. None of them have all of God's attributes, but they try to mix them in some of them and I feel really bad for the youth. So that's my take on UFOs, and I'd like your opinion. The question of the day is this: what is your favorite alien movie? I would definitely recommend not to watch anything that's mixing the occult and so forth in there. Doing anything New Age. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is definitely up that alley. Okay, there's some really occultic activity within that movie. I would not recommend that, even though I don't know if it won any Academy Awards. It was one of Steven Spielberg, I believe, one of his first movies that he did. I could be wrong about that, but I think he's the one that did that. Richard Dreyfuss was in that, and really, really creepy. Now, our next subject, jihadi camps in the United States. Now, I've made part of my ministry be one who debunks conspiracies. I have not found a whole lot of the conspiracies true. I know, unfortunately, some evangelical Christians believe almost every conspiracy, especially if it has to do with some of the political leaders that we don't like. Okay, now, the Clinton death conspiracy thing is interesting, right? All the people that died around him, that's a high body count that kind of speaks for itself. I have not investigated that myself, but the body count itself is so high, the coincidence level so high that it's interesting at least. Maybe I'll look into that at some point. If any of you have looked into that, you can leave a comment on that. The Kennedy one is real interesting. Not Bobby Kennedy's death, but John Kennedy's death in November of 1963 in Dallas, just down the road from where I live. Okay, here's what I find interesting. Most of the material that's been brought forth has been debunked, most of it, but not all of it. Okay, the questions that seem to point to a conspiracy. In fact, I think that it was either the Senate or the House did an investigation in the late 1970s. And they said that Oswald was an actor within it, but it was probably a conspiracy. But they said it probably was not the mafia, and I forget some of the other ones they seem to rule, it was not another government. Now, they could be wrong about that, but that's what the United States, I forget, I wish I knew, was a Congress or the Senate, did an investigation on that and ruled that there was probably a conspiracy involved in John Kennedy's assassination. So that's interesting. That's not open and shut. There was a guy, I think Posner, wrote a book in the late 1990s, early 2000s, Case Closed, where he went over all the material and basically debunked it all. I kind of bought into that for a while, but the one thing that really kind of haunted me was the coincidence. See, if there's such a huge coincidence on something really, really important, it seems to be a red flag. And here's a coincidence that I cannot answer. Maybe somebody out there can. I've never heard an answer to this. Yeah. Christina, we all have to be careful about that. Our life before God, sometimes you get involved in stuff we should not. But here's the coincidence within Kennedy's assassination that I've never had an answer for. I've seen a lot of research on it, read a lot of books on it. I have not seen an answer for this one. And that's this. Kennedy gets killed, and his vehicle drives right by where Oswald just happens to work. How is that? Right? I mean, the guy that kills Kennedy, his route just happens to drive by his building where he worked. Now, if it was a building that he did not work in, that he scouted out because he knew Kennedy would go by a particular route, and he got into a building, found a way to get in and have his gun there and be all set, that would seem to make a little bit of sense. Hello, Jeremy. But how could Oswald have a job, and the decision on Kennedy's route was made just days before, I think, maybe even a day or two before Kennedy actually went on the route. It wasn't like it was done for months so Oswald could figure out the plan and get a job there. So Oswald, the shooter, just happens to have a job in the building where Kennedy is shot from, or at least one of the guns, if there was multiple guns there. That, to me, is something that really can't be answered. So I know I traveled that rabbit trail for a while, but I'm really not into conspiracies. The reason I'm not is because the ones I've investigated, most of them prima facie are false. They're not true. And the other thing is, if you're a Christian and you're out there sharing your faith, and you're even involved in some apologetics, defending the faith, okay, you show why Christianity is true. If you're putting a lot of energy and rationality into that, and then you go and try to prove that the earth is flat, now when you're saying that the earth is flat and everybody else is conspiring against it and saying it's a sphere, if you're jumping on that, then when you're defending the Christian faith and you've also defended the flat earth, guess what? The people that are non-believers are thinking, listen to this guy or gal believes in the flat earth. How can I possibly believe anything he says about Christianity? Okay? If you really believe that nobody landed on the moon, I'm going to be doing a show next week on that, the moon landing. The case is solid, believe it or not. The evidence, if you've studied the moon landing and it being faked, if you've seen the evidence, all that evidence has been debunked. You need to see the evidence as it's debunked, not the evidence as someone's trying to make the case that we never landed on the moon. Look at the photographs after the photographic experts talk about it, and you'll see why it's not true about the flag, about the shadows, about the dust, about the light. All that stuff has been debunked. Not like, oh, that you're kind of squeezing it to make it fit. No, it's been debunked. The other thing, again, is this. The Soviets hated us. They hated America. They're trying to get to the moon, at least acting like they're trying to get to the moon. They were ahead of us in the space program. They hated the U.S. They had great telescopes. They had satellites. If we didn't make it to the moon, guess what? The Soviets and the Chinese tell the world the United States just faked a moon landing. And here's the evidence. And now you can't trust America for anything. Okay? It would completely demolish our foreign policy and our voice anywhere and make America look horrible if we faked the moon landing, because the Soviets hated us. China hated us. They would have brought it forth. Hello, Danny. So good to have you. So the moon landing, there's a lot of evidence that it actually happened. The contrary evidence I've seen, and like I said, I'm going to do a show on this next week. I've seen the contrary evidence against the possibility of a moon landing. All of it has been debunked. And when you listen to the experts on photography and lighting and the flag waving, all that stuff, you'll see the answers are clear and they make sense. It's just common sense. It's not twisting it to make it work. And so the moon landing, the strongest position is the Soviets would have loved to disprove the moon landing and demonstrate America is a big farce. So would the Chinese, as well as the Eastern European countries. So I hope I, get your appetite a little wet for that. We're going to talk about that next week, the moon landing and the evidence that it did not happen, as well as the evidence that it seems like it's really solid that it did occur in July of 1969. So I'm not one into conspiracies. Boy, it took you a long time to tell us that, right? And that's why I say the jihad camps in the United States is very disturbing and a reality, okay? We know this because government authorities have said the last couple of weeks it is a reality. Liberal newspapers and liberal media outlets have also said it's a reality. Those who would have a great hatred for the idea that it would be true, okay? Former CIA operative Joseph Asa, he said this: there are so many people in the United States that are part of the jihad ideology who are doing either fundraising here in the United States or training in the United States to conduct attacks here in the homeland and abroad, including a training camp that was found recently, just within the last couple of weeks, where the jihadis were training children, notice this, training children to attack schools in the name of the religion of peace, training children to blow up and kill other children in the name of the religion of peace, Islam. Amazing, right? That's what's happening. One example is that Jamaat al-Furqa, this particular group, They claim, and this is probably an exaggeration because a lot of the Islamic groups do exaggerate, but they claim to have 22 training camps across our country. Most of them believe that a messianic figure is going to come back and wipe out Christianity, break the crosses on all the churches, and then reveal Jesus Christ and his hatred for Christianity. Yeah, that's going to happen, right? So what are they saying? They're already building themselves up to follow the Antichrist, right? So notice the largest religion in the world, if you want to call it a religion, it's more of a faith. Christianity, over 2.5 billion people, at least that profess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, getting close to 3 billion. And the second largest group is about a billion to Muslims. So, you know what? Guess who's following the Antichrist? At least so far, it looks like the Jihadis and the Muslims are going to follow the Antichrist. When he is revealed, they're going to say, oh, look, he's the messianic figure that we're waiting for that's going to clean up all this stuff. So that's what's happening. I don't know if you heard also that in the UK, they're trying to keep Franklin Graham from going there to preach at a conference that's discussing hope. Why? Because they say that they want to ban Franklin Graham from coming to Britain, to the UK, because he's a hate speech advocate. Yeah. Festival of Hope. I don't know. That just does not sound like a hate-filled message. The Festival of Hope. That's what Graham's going to be preaching at. Graham has said numerous times that he loves Muslims. He wants to see them saved. Yes, he's spoken about the hard truths about a jihad and about the Islamic scriptures being a book of war and so forth. But truth is truth. What's interesting is Britain, the UK, has banned Martin Sellner, Brittany Pettibone, Lauren Southern, Lutz Bachman from entering the UK. They banned them because they gave lectures against jihad or against Sharia. Because they advocated against Sharia and jihad, they were banned from Britain as those who speak hate speech. Wow. You know, hate speech is one who says, we don't want other people, whatever religion, blowing up people in the name of their religion. We don't want people in another religion forcing people to submit to their false religion. That's hate speech in Britain. What's interesting is they allowed a particular Islamic sheikh into the country, and this is what he said. Now notice they don't allow people who lecture against jihad, that lecture against Sharia, they don't allow them into the country. They ban them, but they allowed this guy in, the Sheikh Al-Arefi, and this is what he said. Devotion to jihad for the sake of Allah and the desire to shed blood and to smash skulls and to sever limbs for the sake of Allah and in the defense of his religion is undoubtedly an honor for the believer. Wow. Allah said that if a man fights infidels, the infidels will be unable to prepare to fight. They allowed that guy into the UK. Wow. Amazing. One who wants to shed blood and smash skulls and sever limbs for the sake of Allah. Come on in, the UK, come on in. But if you lecture against jihad or Sharia, you can't come in. Wow. Another guy named Hamza Sodagar was allowed in the UK, even though this is what he said. He said, if there's homosexual men, the punishment is one of 5 things. Now, this guy was allowed into the UK, a Muslim cleric. 1, the easiest one, chop off their head. That's the easiest. 2nd, burn them to death. 3rd, throw them off a cliff. 4th, tear down a wall on them and let them die under it. 5th, a combination of the above. Wow. The British government allows those guys in, but bans anybody who lectures against jihad and Sharia. Wow. Sad, sad, sad. Now, see, I know that Christianity's true. The UFO phenomenon, the alien stuff, all the occult, all the jihad stuff, false, false, false. Not just a bad idea, it's false. We know it. Now, beyond and above that, I know that Christianity is absolutely certain. that I have full certitude, psychologically, rationally, emotionally, and spiritually. I have absolute full certitude that Christianity is true. Why? Because there's a tremendous amount of proof after proof after proof for the certitude and the certainty of Christianity. I use the word certain in its philosophical sense. So absolute full certainty. I know Christianity is true. It's not just probably true. It's not just the case that it has the most evidence. It does have the most evidence, but it has absolute certain proof upon certain proof. I'll give you just one. Just one. Okay, here it is. Unchanging, universal, absolute truth exists. Like 1 + 1 is 2. Okay, that is certain. That is true. It's absolute and it's universal. What that means, it's true here, right now. It's going to be true tomorrow. It's true on the moon. It's true across the galaxy. It was true yesterday. It's universally true. It's absolute. 1 + 1 is 2. Unchanging, universal, absolute truth is, as far as its nature, is ontologically universal and greater and loftier. It's greater than the physical cosmos, in other words, our whole physical universe, and it's greater than the human mind, the physical brain. Since both of them, the full cosmos, the physical cosmos and the human brain, both of them are not absolute. They don't have universal power or reach, and they're not immutable. God is immutable, which means unchanging, universal in power and reach, and is absolute in his aseity. In other words, he's not contingent upon anything. Everything's contingent upon God. God is absolute. God has the nature or the ontological capacity to account for unchanging or immutable, universal, absolute truth, like 1 + 1 is 2. If unchanging, universal, absolute truth, like 1 + 1 = 2, then God. There is unchanging, immutable, universal, absolute truth, like 1 + 1 is 2, thus God. God must exist. What's interesting about that certain proof is, if an atheist or anybody, even your own mind, doubts it and wants to attack it logically or rationally, when you attack it, you have to assume and utilize that which is already within that proof. So you defeat yourself before you start. You cut the limb off that you're sitting on before you even start. It's like this. It's like saying, I want to get rid of that mountain in front of me by throwing more dirt on top of the mountain. So when one wants to try to disprove this proof, what they're doing is actually affirming it and building upon it, strengthening the proof as they're trying to disprove it, which is really interesting. So it's like the guy trying to take down the mountain by adding dirt to the mountain. He's only adding to it, not taking away. This truth is certain, it's powerful, and it grows as anyone attacks it. And that's just the way it is. It's similar to, since we're talking about sci-fi in the sense with the aliens and the UFOs, it's similar to that electric monster, I think it was in the old Outer Limits TV show from the early 60s, well before most of us were born. Early 1960s, there's this Outer Limits show. I watched the reruns when I was a kid. Fascinating show. And they had this electric monster. I forget how he came about. Somehow he came out, I think, within some kind of computer system and a radio transmitter, and he came onto the earth. And he's an electronic monster. And he's on a rampage. And every time he hits some power source, he grows. He grows in power. Okay. So the U.S. government gets called to take care of this electric monster, this power monster. So they get all the big guns, they shoot their big guns on it, but every time they shoot their guns at it, it just grows bigger. So finally they say, okay, we need to get an atomic bomb and get rid of this thing once and for all. So there they are, all the army men ready to kill this electric monster and blow it away with a nuclear bomb. And so they set off a nuclear bomb against this electric monster. And boom, it blows up. The mushroom crowd's there. The wind blows past them. And then it starts dissipating. The cloud dissipates. And the guys with the field glasses, the army guys with the field glasses, look the place where the atom bomb struck the electric monster. And oh my, the electric monster got bigger, much bigger, absorbed the power from the atomic bomb. And that's what this certain proof does, as well as many other certain proofs. You can see them in my book called Fake Atheism, or see them in the hundreds and hundreds of videos we have on Cross and Crown Radio on YouTube. Cross and Crown, subscribe there. Also a place to donate if you want. We really appreciate that. Cross and Crown Radio on YouTube. Hundreds and hundreds of videos on the certitude of the Christian faith. And the reason is because when they attack, we just had a little break there, I think because of our storm out here in Granbury. Lots of rain, big thunderstorm. So if I lose you, I'll see you next time. But as I close out the program, as people attack this proof, and they're trying to disprove it, they're actually building into it, just like the army trying to attack the Electro Monster by launching an atomic bomb against it to just grow in power. Why? Because when you attack the argument, just this one I gave tonight on the argument from truth, you have to presuppose truth and absolutes and universals as you attack it. So you're building into it. You're not diminishing it. You can't refute it. You try to refute it, you stultify yourself. You impale yourself. You defeat yourself. So that's amazing. Christianity is true. It must be true. There's not a single doubt about it, because even doubt requires God, which is interesting. And we'll talk about that tonight. But that's the case. Now, if you're out there, and we have, especially on our YouTube channel, thousands of listeners from around the world. If you're listening to this and you say, man, you know what? I was an atheist, but God's really touched my heart tonight, or a Muslim, a Hindu, whatever. Know this: Jesus Christ came and he died on the cross for our sins. He was buried and he rose again on the third day. That's 1 Corinthians 15. That's what the scriptures say. If God, through his word and spirit, has touched your heart, and you're saying, you know what? God is doing something with me. I really believe in Jesus now. If that's you, you come to Christ right now and you profess, Father, I believe. I believe in Jesus. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I believe Jesus died on the cross for all my sins, and God raised him from the dead on the third day. I turn from my ways and I give him my whole life and my whole heart. I'll follow him all the days of my life. Amen, amen. If that's you, contact us, send us a Facebook message, leave a comment, or if this is on YouTube and you're watching it, or on our podcast, leave a comment or an email, and we'll get back to you. We'll send you two free books, and if you need a physical Bible, we'll send you one of those. But if you committed to Christ tonight, whether you were backslidden or the first time, get a Bible app on your phone immediately and get involved in a good Bible-believing church immediately. Don't wait. Don't hold back. Get involved. And I really thank all of our listeners out there. You guys make this possible. I'm so blessed. People from all around our country tend to listen to this on Facebook. And then when we put it on YouTube, people from all over. We're just so grateful for our audience. We just started this about 10 months ago. And the success that we've had is not due to me. It's not due to how brilliant we are. It's not due to anything that we're trying to do. It's due to, number one, God and his grace and him wanting people to stand up for the certain truth of the Christian faith. And that's what we're doing. And also our audience. You're so supportive. And we thank you so much for doing that. Like I said, you can help support us by going to Cross and Crown Radio on YouTube. So leave Facebook for a moment and go to YouTube. It really, really helps. There's also a donation button there. But so glad that you're with us tonight, especially Harry, JJ, Chauncey, Tim, all you guys, Mike. So glad that you guys were with us tonight. And till next time, just may God richly bless you.
Hey guys, you can really help us if you donate to our worldwide media outreach. Just go to our Patreon page at Mike Robinson Apologetics on Patreon, or click the donate button on our main page on YouTube and give as the Lord leads. Thank you so much.